Hello! So this is part of my Preptober series in preparation for NaNoWriMo. And so, because this NaNoWriMo, I am pretty much starting from scratch in terms of for the project I'm working on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I plot my new work. I would describe myself as somewhere between a pure plotter and a plantser, so someone who does both plotting and pantsing, which is just kind of winging it. Every novel I have ever worked on starts differently. Sometimes I am a complete pantser and I just start writing, or I plot things out first, which is why I don't really feel I fit into any of the different categories, just because the process for all of my works has just been different. And for me personally, it's always been the genre that dictates how much I plot versus how much I pants. And so for this NaNoWriMo, I'm working on a sci-fi fantasy. And for me personally, sci-fi fantasy requires the most plotting out of any genre I've ever written. Especially if there's a magic system involved, which in this story there is. I like to have at least the basic rules of the magic system worked out. If not, at least some form of the magic system completed before I focus on the major conflict, because certain rules about magic systems I find tend to very much influence the major conflicts of the story. Because I really don't have the magic system completely worked out for this new story yet, I started my Preptober by creating a document that I think most people would call it a brain dump, but I call it a book dump, because I feel if it was like a true brain dump and truly just getting everything out of my brain, we would be here all day. But for my book dump document, I put down everything that I know about the story, or at least every thought I've had about the story or idea, into the book dump document. As sort of, more thoughts come out and are put into the book dump, I then start to organize all of my thoughts into different categories, going from most important to least important. And like I said, genre affects a lot of my writing process. So for this book dump, I put characters and conflict as the first two categories, and I pretty much do that for all of my stories. But then all the categories afterwards are pretty much more related to the genre, like the magic system is next, and the world politics comes after that, and then after that sort of miscellaneous kind of different thoughts or ideas that aren't quite fully formed yet. Now, while characters are probably the most important part of a story for me, I'm horrible at naming characters, so in my character section I have a list of characters, but I'm only one person really has a solidified name, and everybody else sort of has like a title. Usually this is a title related to like their job within the story or their occupation. Sometimes I've also named characters just like antagonist, protagonist. I haven't done that for this story, and I haven't done that in a long time, but sometimes it's been that bad where like I'm writing a story for the first time and I can't think of any other name for my main characters other than protagonist and antagonist. Now, the second category for me is always conflict. Now, conflict doesn't necessarily need to be like the main event of the story. Conflict for me is just anything in this world that could go wrong. Usually the first ideas that come out of my head, however, are sort of ideas for what the main conflict of the story will be. But conflict is just things that can go wrong to me. It's not necessary. It doesn't need to be like world ending. It doesn't need to be like massive problem that'll take multiple books to fix. It's just things that could go wrong, particularly in relation to the characters. Because, conflict doesn't always have to be sort of X country attacking Y country or X planet attacking Y planet. It can also be sort of character drama kind of conflict as well. Now, magic systems. My nano story has a magic system, and there are hard magic systems and soft magic systems. And I know there's a video, I believe by Hello Future Me, who's another YouTuber, who will explain this way better than I ever could. So I will leave that in the description. Like I said, I haven't worked out all that much about the magic system yet, but I do, as a writer, tend to gear towards soft magic systems because I feel if you get too hard of a magic system, it gets too video gamey, where you kind of know what level everybody is at, and then therefore the sort of like battles that involve the magic system become a little too predictable. However, storytelling wise, I do understand the benefits of a harder magic system, and I have played around with hard magic systems in the past. Actually, a few years ago, I was writing a like middle grade or even like lower kind of elementary school level fantasy series in which the magic system had sort of named levels to them, and the characters would progress through these different levels at different rates, and you sort of knew who was at a higher level than other characters, and that was what generated a lot of the conflict. That was actually, it was between the current sci-fi fantasy I'm writing and then the middle grade female-centric fantasy. Think like particularly like Winx Club, Witch, Sailor Moon, those kind of like all-female fantasy series that are very openly, mainly targeted at girls. It was between this current story I'm writing and then that story I was deciding on for writing for NaNoWriMo. I ended up going with the sci-fi fantasy, but I am definitely going to work on the middle grade fantasy at some point in the future. Sort of the final section in my current book dump document is about world politics. Now, if you read Brains of the Operation, which is my Star Wars fanfiction that I've been working on for the past few Camp NaNoWriMos, you'll know that politics is very much embedded in my story, especially stories about like rulers or people who have to reign over like a kingdom, or in Star Wars case, the galaxy. And I've just personally never been a fan of stories where everybody on one side all adhere to sort of the same philosophy or all universally agree on everything and are kind of just this monolith. Particularly when it comes to like the bad guys, which is what I write in my Star Wars fanfiction. I find it's always very common that sort of the bad guys are sort of equally unified on one philosophy and just hating the good guys and wanting them to be gone and destroyed. And I always like it that even on the bad guy side, which is usually so monolithic, that within their own faction there are people who disagree, who have differing philosophies and different ideas on how to run things. And so that's where the idea of the world politics section in my book dump is from. Even on the side about which I will be writing, there are people within the faction that disagree, and potentially on the villain side, so I haven't really worked that out yet, but that is what Preptober is for, isn't it? So that's my video on my sort of book dump or brainstorm of my novel. I'm not quite at the point yet where I'm plotting individual events. I'm more sort of at the stage of crafting the wider kind of big picture grand scheme of what this book is going to be, which, who knows, might change, especially once we actually get into NaNoWriMo itself and I'm physically writing this thing. And why am I out of focus? Oh my god. I think it's the window over here that's causing me to occasionally go out of focus. I tried filming this with the shades all the way down, but my camera makes me just look very pink when the shades are all the way down, so I'm sorry. So anyway, tangent aside, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you are a pantser, a plantser, or a plotter, or you're kind of like me, where everything's different every time you write. It's just pure chaos every time, and there is never a plan. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.